A lot of people notice this, that the report says that 2023 is going to feel like a recession for many people, that the worst is yet to come. Just to get a better idea, what exactly is this worst that might come next year, and what's the worst case scenario here?
We are projecting that economic growth is going to slow down in 2023 compared to 2022. In 2022, we're projecting 3.2%. And 2023, we're now projecting 2.7%. That's 0.2 percentage points below our July forecast. Now, you might say 2.7%, that doesn't look so bad. It's still positive, and it's true. The economy, global economy, would not be in a global recession then. But when you open the hood and you look at what happens in a number of countries, what we found is that already about a third of the global economy is going to be experiencing a contraction. And by this, I mean 2 quarters of consecutive quarters of negative growth. And so that's up from only about 5% of the global economy that was projecting to experience that back in April. And that's both for 2022 and 2023. So that's one way to sort of understand that there is going to be quite a bit of economic pain. A second dimension that's important is inflation is projected to come down, peaking maybe about now, between now and the end of this year, and coming down next year, but it's still going to be somewhat elevated. Global inflation will projected at 6.5%. So you're going to have a combination of growth slowing, contraction in many countries, and then still inflation pressures that are quite high. Then the third part of the, if you want, of what we're concerned about is this is the baseline projection. These are the baseline projections.
I remember in 2020, what we had was a public health crisis. But right now, at the end of 2022, we have this juxtaposition of a public health crisis, an energy crisis, cost of living crisis, environmental crisis. Is there an economic perspective to analyze what had happened in the world that led to this situation that we're in?
We do realize now that we live in a more shock-prone world. We have this sequence of shocks that have been hitting the economy. And in a sense, you know, if the way I describe it is the global economy has taken 3 consecutive hits on the nose, and it's sort of limping along now. It's not a knockout, but it's certainly not doing terribly well. And so these, you know, once you're hit by a shock, it makes you more vulnerable if something else happens. And then the impact of this is going to compound in a sense. And so that's sort of what we're seeing. The economy was, you know, recovering quite robustly from COVID, but of course having to deal with price pressures that were in part the result of both the shock itself, the COVID shock, but also the policies that were put in place to try to protect people, and businesses. And so the economy was already dealing with that burst of inflation in 2021, 2022, and that required a pivot of policy. Now, on top of that, you layer the energy crisis that comes from the war. And now you have another inflationary shock. So now, you know, you have another layer in terms of the fragilities the global economy is experiencing. And, you know, climate is slightly different, but it also interacts with all of this. Because why do I say it's different? Well, it's playing out at a different scale. Now, of course, sure, we're going to see more climate events. We're going to see the trend is not good if nothing is done. But it's playing out at a lower at a lower frequency, if you want, in terms of the process that we're seeing. But it is also interacting with the other crisis. More near-term crisis makes it harder to maybe address some of the long-term challenges we face, because you want to address what's in front of you, not necessarily what's going to be playing out over the next 20 years. And of course, doing that can actually come back and haunt you. So policymakers have to be juggling both the near-term challenges, inflation, rebuilding fiscal buffers, and at the same time they have to be keeping an eye on the longer term ones.